Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Shevetta. Welcome to the Widowhood.
Hi, Tina. Thank you for having me.
I know it's like, really? Welcome to the Widowhood? It's like, sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. So we are going to have a conversation, but the conversation is going to be leveraged from the book you wrote, A
Okay.
Widow I Became,
Yes.
due to the cruelty of cancer, but victorious in Jesus. How
Yes.
did you
Yes.
come up with that title?
Well, that was kind of interesting. When I submitted the book, now this has been 3 years ago, I think, because it's just been 5 years since my husband passed. So
Right. The book
about
was published
three and a half.
2020 and your
Thank you.
husband
Thank
passed
you.
in 2019.
19. Yes.
So,
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you.
I
Thank
see,
you.
I didn't see the little note.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe that
I
was
was
a
actually
quiz.
just
You was trying to quiz me a little bit. Okay.
exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because time it has been fleeting. And I'm just like the time is really going fast. But when I submitted it, and honestly, I can't even remember what I had the title was. So when I submitted the book, my publisher that I had a contact person with, I was kind of bouncing some things around, ideas with him, because I had one name and I remember it being like extremely long. And he was like, well, that's a little bit too long. So we kind of broke it up to a widow I became, and then subcategory, due to the cruelty of cancer, but victorious in Jesus. Because I was like, I wanted to target widows, but I also want to target anybody,
Okay.
where it can bless and encourage anyone, whether you're married, single, whatever the case may be, because anyone can read the book and be encouraged by it.
Okay.
So that was kind of like the intent of it.
Okay. Okay. That
Yeah.
that makes sense. Um, I have gone through. So, one, let me ask this question: where can someone find your book, and what is the price of it?
So one, you can go to my website, which is widowinpurpose.com. You can order it from there, and then that's something that I actually ship, or
Okay.
you can get it from like Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and just, put the title in and it'll come up. I'm not even really sure how much it is on Amazon anymore.
Okay.
I know originally I think it was like $14.
Okay.
If you do it through my website, it is $20 because of, shipping and handling and everything like that.
Okay.
Um, if if someone just happens to be local, like here in Indianapolis or Indiana area, it's 15
Okay.
because I do have books on hand. So yeah.
Okay. Because right out the gate, so they know where to get the book from.
Yes, yes, thank you.
You're welcome. So, I am from Chicago, Illinois, born and raised.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I want you to tell the audience why that is relevant to this conversation.
Probably because of the church that my husband grew up in and that we attended. So
Yes.
Old Landmark Church with Bishop Mitchell on the
Hmm.
south side of Chicago.
And I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I went to Corliss High School and graduated from
Wow.
there.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Small world. Yes.
And that's why it's called Widowhood, because I'm a hood girl at heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's like Gary. So yes, I get
Exactly.
it.
So I'm going to read a little bit from page 7, the beginning of our love
Okay.
story. And the way
Okay.
I'd like for this to go, I would like to
Mhm.
read the excerpt and I would like you to share from your heart, not so
Okay.
much trying to recap this story, because the goal is for them to have the essence of who you are and desire to want to understand your
Okay.
story and your journey. Is that okay
Okay.
with you?
Okay. That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. There was a song years ago that said, "A love like this shall never pass away." Our love story began after meeting in high school in Gary, Indiana. I was 16 years old in the 11th grade, and Val was 15 years old in the 10th grade.
Yeah. So we were high school sweethearts, and at the time that I met him, I had a boyfriend at the time. Um, we had only been together, I think, like a couple of months, nothing too serious. And we went to a football game. It was a football game, and then afterwards, it was Celebration Station, which is kind of like, Chuck E. Cheese right now, where we would go after like the football games and everything. Everybody just kind of go. It was a big arcade, just kind of where we went and hung out. And it was a group of us at the table, and I remember he came over because he knew some of the girls that were sitting at the table. And one of my friends at the table, I remember giving him my telephone number. I didn't tell her to, but she did. So, long story short, after that, probably a week later, or maybe 2 weeks later, um, I think he ended up calling me because that particular night he had got a lot of telephone numbers. He had got a lot of them, but mine
Oh,
was
they're just flying off.
he was, and mine was on the back of I think it was for like Celebration Station. So it had a bunch of balloons on it. So it was on the back of that was a big blue piece of paper with balloons on the back. So mine kind of like stood out compared to just your normal like white paper, whatever the case may be. But mine has stood out. So yeah, that's how that came about. And we talked, I think, for like a couple of hours. I think the first time we talked, and in the midst of that conversation, my boyfriend that I had ended up calling me, and some things was kind of said, and he was like, "I think we should break up," and I was like, "Yeah, I think so too." And I clicked right back over and called by, and that was all
On
she
this,
wrote.
hold on, y'all was on this. You were on the phone with him.
Well, I hung up because when he called, I was like, "I'll call you back. This is such and such calling me," and we talked literally for like a couple of seconds. It wasn't even long. He was just like, "I think we should break up," and I'm like, "All right, cool, whatever."
You like
Call
say
Bob back.
less.
Yes, I mean, that was it. I mean, that was it because my interest was already there,
Okay.
and we just started talking from there. And I think maybe like after a couple of weeks is when we officially, started dating or going together, as we called it back in the day. So 1990.
So 1990, we started dating.
Yes.
And then after about 1.5 years of living together and
Mhm.
committed over 7 years, Va asked me to marry him. This was in February 1998. What happened between that first date and this proposal?
So it was 7.5 years. It was 7.5 years. So I graduated in 1992. He graduated in 93. So I stayed home, went to a business school, did that. Um, got like a internship in Chicago. I was working in Chicago when I think I was 19. And I did that for 2 years, and then Vi kind of got in the streets, um, and was kind of doing that thing. And then we had been talking about moving to Indianapolis. So Indianapolis from Gary is about two hours. And at that time, a lot of people from Gary was moving out this way. So we came to bit. No, we kind of talked about it, and then something happened. Oh, he had a dream or something, and I can't remember if it was something was going to happen to him, or it was enough to kind of like put an unction up under him, basically. And we came down one day. I remember it was raining. Went to apartment complex, pretty much got approved, and we moved like probably within the next couple of weeks or something like that. So it was a pretty quick transition. But when we moved here, so we moved to Indianapolis in 96,
Okay.
96. And from that time, so a year and a half of living together, shacking up, as we called it back then. We were shacking up, I was working, he was, trying to work, but still kind of doing his little hustling on the side, going back forth to Gary, everything like that. But in the midst of that, you can tell that God was just breaking him down, because nothing was like really going the way that he wanted it.
Okay.
And then so we got engaged. He asked me to marry him. It I think I had just washed my hair, just did my hair. It was nothing like over the top. And he got down on one knee, and I think he was like, "So you were married?" And I'm like, "You serious?" Like, yeah. So we set our date, which was for September 5th, 1998. And he was like, "Okay," but he wanted to go back to, Waukegan, Illinois, to see his grandmother. So we went to go see her, because she was part of O Landmark as well in Chicago. So anyway, he was like, "I want to go to my home church." And from there, he went up, was delivered. And when we came back, we were shacking up. So it was just like, oh, he, got his life right. We can't be shacking up. So forth and so on. A couple weeks later, we ended up going to the Justice of the Peace to get married, because we were living together. And then we still had our big wedding, 6 months later, basically. So,
And
yeah.
there are pictures in here.
Yes.
You mentioned a couple of terms.
Mhm.
I have a concept of what they mean, but people that listen to this broadcast come from different walks
Mhm.
of life. So I
Mhm.
want to circle back. And you said that Val was in the streets. What does that mean?
So he was a weed dealer,
Okay.
and he was a pretty big weed dealer in Gary, Indiana at that
Okay.
time. So he was hustling basically, and you know, that's what he was doing at that
Okay.
time. Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, if we're going to
It
talk
is,
about
it is, it
the
is, because
real
he
talk,
has a powerful testimony, of just the whole transition, going from that to God saving him, and then ultimately becoming a pastor, so it's definitely a powerful testimony to tell on his behalf.
right? So
Mhm,
you mentioned being delivered. What does that mean?
mhm. Being delivered is giving your life fully surrendered to God, and letting him be the leading guiding factor in your life. So when you're delivered, you no longer do things that you did before that are of a sinful nature. So that's what happened with him, because he was a weed smoker and everything, like every single day. And then once he was saved, was delivered, those desires, that taste, all of that was gone, because he truly surrendered his life to God at that time.
Okay. You may mention, thank you. You may mention another term, saved. How does one do this? Not just these words, but what does that action look like in the
Mhm.
fulfillment of it? And and are you saying that you're delivered always when you're saved, or that is all, what does that look
Well
like?
far as in our background, which is basically was holiness. So it's basically living a sanctified life, separated from worldly things, but one, just believing that God is, that Jesus is his son,
Okay.
and having that belief and truly believing in that, to be delivered, that you believe in him, that he was born and died and rose again for our sins, or for our
Okay.
salvation.
So being saved is the acceptance of Jesus Christ.
Yes,
The
into your
deliverance,
life.
how does that relate?
So deliverance is fully being delivered and surrendering your sins to God. Some people, when they get saved, they're not um it's a process for some people.
Okay.
My husband grew up in the holiness church, so he knew certain things was not right, smoking, drinking, all of that stuff. He knew that. So when he was saved, that was an instant deliverance for him.
Okay.
Um, So that's kind of what that is. Because God, if you truly surrender to God, those habits, those sinful natures, he will deliver you from those.
Okay. Okay. So thank you for taking the time to explain that. I don't like to go over terms that people kind of say in their particular
Mhm.
community haphazardly and use it as an opportunity to be able to expound on that.
Right. Right. That's fine.
So you talked about him getting saved, and I'm going to read this portion of the book, and then I want you to share from there.
Mhm. Mhm.
We went back to Chicago the next Sunday. I went up for prayer for salvation, but I knew I didn't receive it. Va didn't ask any questions. We went straight to the Justice of the Peace on March 20th, 1998 to be married. What did that
Yeah.
mean?
So basically what that was is because we were living together, so we were shacking up or living in sin. When you're saved, marriage is honorable in God's eyes. So living together, he's saved, I'm not, but we're shacking up. That's not right. That's not of God. And we were considered to be, in essence, unequally yoked,
Okay.
basically. So we had been together for 7.5 years at this time. So basically, when we went to church that next Sunday, I went up for prayer. Um, Ultimately, I mean, it was supposed to be for salvation, but I knew it wasn't. So basically, I went up just so we could go ahead and get married because we had been together 7.5 years at this time, and I wasn't about to lose that, basically.
Okay.
So and Bob was strong in his faith that he was willing to walk away from that, because he knew what we was doing was not pleasing to God. So that's how that came about. So we just went to the Justice of the Peace because he was like, "Oh, she's saved now. Let's go to the Justice of the Peace," and that's how we ended up basically going to the Justice of the Peace.
So I want to say I appreciate your transparency
Thank
because if
you.
I'm understanding this correctly, you kind of faked it.
Yeah, essentially, yes.
Okay.
Yes. 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 And a lot of people do that. I just
Yes.
back then,
So he didn't ask any questions. You ain't say nothing.
exactly. He assumed he probably knew that I didn't, but he didn't ask, and I didn't say like no, I didn't, just so we can go ahead and get married.
So how does that
Because
relate to the?
you have older people in the mix, and they're like, if she not saved, y'all can't uh basically, one, you can't be living together because he's saved and she's not, so you can't be living together. And then if she's not saved, you can't marry her because she's not saved. So we had older um people in the mix, giving advice and so forth and so on. So like I said, he probably knew, but was just like, all right, we getting ready to go to the Justice of the Peace. And I didn't say anything otherwise to say, no, I didn't. And we just went to the Justice of the Peace.
Okay, couple of
And then
questions.
later on, we of course realized and I shared that I really didn't. And then
Okay.
eventually I did, so.
Okay, a couple of questions. And I appreciate the transparency and the candor because this dives into the opportunity. So when you say unequally yoked, what does that term mean?
So that's just because really in the Bible, unequally yoked is really about what is it? The not the camels, the oxen, where they use a yoke to make them walk together so they don't
Right.
get separated. But sometimes we use that and take it out of context
Okay.
from being equally yoked, basically saying that you can't have a believer and a non-believer equally yoked married together. So
Okay.
like if one person, and I'm just throwing this out there, just say one person is Baptist and then another person is Muslim. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? That's not equally yoked because that's totally two different beliefs.
Okay.
So in that essence, you know what I'm saying? He was saved. I wasn't. Not that I didn't, because I believed in God, I believed in Jesus, but I hadn't surrendered my life over to God. So in the church that we were in, being unequally yoked at that time was considered one saved and the other person is not saved. And you can't
Okay.
be married to an unsaved person if you're saved, basically. Yeah.
Okay. So being older you
Hmm.
and talking to someone so you were in your 20s at that point in time?
When we got married, we were 23.
Okay, in
We
your
were,
early 20s.
wait, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
early 20s,
I'm
23, yeah.
tracking. So
Yes.
right now you're in your what age
I'll
group?
be 50 next month.
So if a 23-year-old came to you with this
Hmm.
struggle,
Hmm.
how would you talk to them about that?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I would talk from a natural perspective, and then I would talk from a spiritual perspective. Um, because with me, I had no regrets. I had no regrets. You know, some people get married for the wrong reasons or get married thinking they can change somebody and then it don't work out or they were miserable. So everybody's situation is not mine. So sometimes it's kind of hard for me to say that because everybody's situation is not the same. For
Mhm.
me, it was a blessing because God had a orchestrated plan for our lives. So for us, it worked. But like I said, I would talk to somebody, you know, my kids is 21 and 25. So we kind of have this conversation, you know, quite a bit. But like I said, I probably would first ask, do you really love him and are you ready for marriage? I'll say that. Are
Okay.
you really ready for it or do you feel like you're forced to get married because now he's gotten himself right with the Lord and you haven't? And do you feel like it's a pressure to get married um because of him changing his life, but are you really ready for marriage? Would you even be thinking about marriage if he hadn't got his life together and then basically you guys need to get married? So I think that would probably be the first question. Is it a pressure point?
Okay.
Like, is it a pressure point basically? Because if he's truly living for God and you're not, and you feel like you're not ready for that to turn your life over, he's going to walk away from that, you know.
Okay.
So it just depends on that individual. And like I said, in a way, this is kind of a hard question for me just because my situation was, like you said, kind of fake it, but ultimately it was an orchestrated plan for our life, and everybody's situation is not like that.
But I guess we
So
really don't know that it's orchestrated till you're on the
it
back end of it. You don't
right,
what
exactly. You really
so somebody I mean, that part is not known
right,
then. It is known
right,
and when you look
exactly.
backward. So that this
Exactly.
point of decision
It
is not something we're making at that point of this
exactly.
angelic divine. We're
Exactly.
making it
Exactly.
right.
Right. And I think too, depending on how your relationship is too at that time, if you
Okay.
have, I'm gonna say because it's kind of a new term, if it's kind of like toxic or something like that, and it's just a lot of factors that play into that, you
Okay.
know. Um, so with us, we had a beautiful relationship even before we turned our lives over to God.
Okay.
So for us, we knew marriage was going to be a thing for us. I
Okay.
mean, we already knew that. Like I said, we have been together 7.5 years. Yes, we were young, but we knew ultimately, yes, we are going to get married.
Okay.
For somebody that maybe the marriage has never come up
Okay.
until now, you know what I'm saying? That may be like, we ain't never really talked about this. I don't know if I'm ready for this, you know. So it just kind of depends on the scenario of the situation. But like I said, depending on the individual, I would do natural and spiritual. It just depends on the flow of
Okay.
that relationship with that individual. I mean, that's probably just the best way I can kind of
Okay. No,
kind of
thank
say
you.
it, yeah,
I mean,
on a
somebody,
hypothetical.
no, no, and that's what it is. I mean, when we're sharing our journey, people ask questions, and they
Right,
want to know.
exactly.
And if we gloss
Exactly.
over the part where it goes,
Right, exactly. Exactly. That's not helping.
at all, at all.
Exactly, exactly.
So after that, I want to read this part. We
Okay.
began commuting back and forth to Chicago for church, and I was
Mhm,
saved and sanctified on September 28th, 1998. I fully
mhm,
committed my life to God. God blessed our union with two beautiful children and was called to ministry. And later, as a pastor, he was established upon the Rock Holiness Church.
mhm,
What did you think about him being a pastor and a pastor's wife and your children? And
mhm,
how does
mhm.
that look?
It was, because we had a small base ministry, so he was called to minister. So we was at a local church here in Indianapolis, so he got called to be a minister. So he was already walking in that before he was actually called to pastor. So we had really like a small base ministry. But I never looked at myself as like a first lady or anything like that, but essentially I was because he he was the pastor. So I just roll with it. And I think too, one, because of my personality, I'm kind of an adaptable type
Okay.
person. So for me, it was easy shifting into that role, I guess is it,
Okay.
if that's what you want to say, shifting into that, because I knew the bigger plan, I knew God's will, and then I was walking, I had my own relationship with God, so it wasn't like a question of, are you sure you was called? It wasn't nothing like that. So I was
Okay.
sure of him and his calling, and then I was sure of me as his wife, as if you want to say first lady or whatever the case may be. So it
Okay.
was not a hard transition for me into that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. So we went from September 28th, 1998. And girl, you jumped us to March 13th, 2018.
I
That
I
that is 20 years. I did the math because what I've been trying to do some homework here.
okay, okay.
Give me
And
like
I know, and essentially, and
the
that's funny because
marriage,
nobody
life.
has.
I mean, 20 years. I mean,
It was a 20-year gap, and the thing is, one, I never thought to write a book. I've never wanted to do a book, never thought about it. So when my husband passed, it was like he had such a powerful testimony, and I need to get his testimony out, basically. But God was like, no, this is your testimony to tell. But essentially, it was about the cancer diagnosis, God's faithfulness in that. So I just touched on our early years just briefly, just to kind of, just briefly,
I should have brought up some
So
salt so I could have said,
yeah. Now maybe later, I may dab deeper, what I'm saying, if I do another book
"Damn it!
to
Oh,
give
what you
you
mean
another.
deeper?" You said,
Yeah.
"Damn."
I know. So I just wanted to do, because like I said, ultimately it was just really about the cancer diagnosis, the journey, his passing. That's ultimately what it was, even, just based on the title. But yeah, that's funny because I ain't never think about it like that. That was a huge jump. Yeah, yeah.
I
It was a
wanted to,
huge
so
jump.
okay, so since tell me something about your marriage. Tell me something, your favorite memory of him. Give me something of that.
Wow. God truly blesses. There's so many things that I miss. It's been 5 years. Um, I miss his personality because he had a big personality, his humor. Um, it's so many things that pop up and I just start laughing because I was like, he would just make a joke out of that.
Okay.
Um, just his caring, one, as a husband, as a father. He was very present. You know, he loved his family, he loved God, but he loves his family, and just our relationship. I mean, we were just in sync, you know. How God just blessed us, but it is so many things that I miss, and I think a lot of things have kind of been coming up just because I've had a lot of milestones happen here recently with my kids and things of that nature. So it's bringing up like so much stuff. Like, man, he's missing out on this, he's missing out on that, or if something, you know, funny happens, it's like, man, I can't even, you know, tell
Right.
him. So it's just so many things. Like I said, we were still in love. I'll say that because there's a difference of loving someone and being in love. We were still in love. We did date nights, you know, date days, did getaways.
Mm.
Um, you know, he had this one thing. I actually just kind of laughed about this. Like, he'll hold my hand and he'll be like, "Oh, I must still love you." He said, "Because I still get that warm, fuzzy feeling," you know, stuff like that, you know, some of
Right.
the holding hands driving, holding hands watching TV, you know. So it was just, I mean, God just really blessed us, you know, just straight out the gate. Like I said, even before we gave our life to God, I mean, we had a beautiful relationship. You know, and a lot of people, you know, looked to us and admired us, you know, for
Okay.
that. You know, like I said, we was together 28 and a half years, and like I said, it was no regrets, you know, from getting married young as we were, you know, 23. I mean, I get that is that is young, but I mean, it was no regrets, no regrets at all, you
I
know,
can
and I
relate to
just
that.
thank God for that.
My late husband and I got married, I was 22.
Yeah.
We were together for
Wow.
32 years.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
heart fluttered still every time I saw him, even
Yes.
that last weekend together.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
So we're gonna jump 20 years.
Okay.
And the part I'm gonna read is on the evening of Tuesday, March 13, 2018, we went to the ER to having severe stomach pain for 2 days. The CT scan showed possible infection around the area where his appendix had been removed in 2010, and the lab work showed low hemoglobin. I want you to pick that up and share to the moment of May 29, 2019, however you want to articulate that. I want to give you the space to share that story
Okay.
without me asking you questions.
Okay. Okay. So that ER visit, it was prompted, you know, like you said, with the severe abdominal pain. Um and we went to the emergency room, and a lot of people think, I'm gonna say this because he had just turned 43 and we had just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary. My husband went to the doctor. He went for his annual checkups, all of that. And he was he was in good health. I mean, he was. So with the diagnosis that he ended up having, which I'll go into that, there was no screening because of his age at that time.
Okay.
So anyway, so we, you know, we went to the ER because of the pain, and they was like, you know, they was like, "Are you sure you got your appendix out?" And we're like, "Yeah." And they was like, "Well, it's a lot of, you know, it's a lot of infection, something going on in that area." And then they just start asking like these leading questions. And with me, I'm in the disability realm, so I have a lot of medical background. So
Okay.
I was just in my mind, I was just, because I remember going in the bathroom, looking in the mirror and just tearing up, because I was just, cancer was the first thing that just kind of came to my mind, just because of the leading questions that they were
Right.
asking. So his hemoglobin was low, and then they was like, well, we need, I think they did like a microscopic something, and they was like, there's blood in your stool or something like that. So you need to do a colonoscopy. So again, you know, he was 43. Back then, you couldn't get a colonoscopy until you was 50. You know,
Right.
it's now 45. So so they admitted him, and he was there for, I think, about like 2.5 days, you know, do the prep and everything, do the colonoscopy. And I remember when the doctor came out, he was like, does cancer run in his family? And I'm just like, no. I mean, off the bat, I was just like, no. You know, he was like, it's a mess in there. He said, it's a mess in there. And he said, you know, he said, we're going to do a biopsy. He said, you know, we can do surgery. He was like, but it's a mess in there. So it was just like, you know, like a gut wrench, like, man, you know, they're already suspecting, you know what I'm saying, something. So anyway, he got discharged. I remember his iron was real low, and he had to go get an iron infusion. And I remember when we went and did that, it was in the rooms where they do chemo treatments. You know, it just so happened when we went, he was the only person there. But it was like almost like we were getting a glimpse. You know, in my mind, this when
Okay.
my husband not really kind of thinking that, but I'm just like, this is where people get chemo treatment. So anyway, we went to the doctor for the pathology results, and he kept emphasizing, he was like, the piece that we were able to biopsy was high grade dysplasia, which means it wasn't cancer yet. And he emphasized that. He kept saying, the piece that we biopsy, it wasn't. He said, so I'm going to refer you to a surgeon. So we did that. And then everybody that God kind of placed in path were like top-notch surgeons, top-notch oncologists, everything. So anyway, we went to the colon and rectal doctor, and I don't know if this was his normal process or he suspected something just based on the CT scan from when he was in the emergency room. But he was like, I want to do another CT scan with contrast because I don't want any surprises. So he went and did that. I remember it was on a Friday, and the doctor was on vacation that week because it was spring break. It was spring break, so he was on vacation, and he went that Friday morning. By that afternoon, the doctor's office was calling us, and they was like, the doctor was concerned that he called in on his vacation to see what the results were. So he probably suspected something, maybe not to the extent of what it was, but he suspected something. So they called us and was like, basically it's 3 spots on the liver. We're referring you to an oncologist like ASAP, basically. So that was on a Friday. And I think by Tuesday, I think, of the next week, we was in an oncologist's office. And again, he's one of the top oncologists out here. And, you know, he talked to us and basically was like, you know, these 3 spots here is, hopefully they're just some cysts. He said, but he said, and he always used to use these analogies and so forth and so on. And he was like, the spots in the liver is like a terrace in New York. He was like, what's in the colon is kind of like a terrace in like Pakistan or whatever. And he was like, so we're going to have to attack this right away. So they sent him for immediate liver biopsy, literally like the next day. So forth and so on. So this, because let me back up, the colon doctor has scheduled surgery. He has
So hold on for a
surgery.
second. We need to use some different analogies in like Pakistan and Muslim. There's a lot of different things going on. And I don't want your podcast to turn into something not about what you want it to be.
I'm sorry.
Somebody hearing a particular word in the intentionality of what you're trying to do be
exactly
askew.
Okay.
That would be my recommendation. but it's
Thank
up
you.
to you.
Okay. And you're gonna delete that out, right? So yeah, I definitely understand, but I understand that.
Okay, I'm
So
just giving guidance of what I was
yeah,
supposed
I
to
mean,
do.
I agree. I didn't think about that, but this is what the doctor was saying to us. But yes,
So let's back up
get
a
it
little bit so you can tell that story in a different way. Yes,
again.
I
Okay. Okay.
so the doctor comes in with the 3 liver thing. Okay, go with that.
The three, yeah. So he had 3 spots on his liver, and he said basically, if if it is cancer, basically you can't have surgery and you need to start chemo right away. Basically, is what he said. He was like, we need to attack this right now.
Okay.
So they scheduled him for immediate biopsy, which was the next day, a liver biopsy. So the surgery, the colon doctor had already scheduled surgery for, I think it was April 16th. I may have my dates out, but it was scheduled for like that following Monday.
Okay.
So we go back to the office that Friday. It was April 13th. Yeah, April 13th. And basically it was like, the liver, the cancer you have is a very aggressive, rare cancer. And you can't have surgery. We need to start chemo right away. And my question was, because he was like, basically, it's stage 4 is metastasized. Basically, it was terminal at diagnosis. And again, with me being in disability, having a medical background, I always had a thought like, why do they give people chemo if they're like stage 4?
Okay.
So I kind of posed that question, and he was just like, well, he said the type of cancer that is in his liver, he said it is aggressive to where it can eat it up in like 6 weeks, basically. So we was like, okay, so obviously this was a devastating, I mean, it was just devastating, So we prayed about it, and my husband's like, all right, I'm gonna just move forward, with the chemo. So he went in to get his port placed, and then they did another colonoscopy, and again, it came back high grade dysplasia based on the piece that they did. So basically, ultimately, his diagnosis was a neuroendocrine cancer that it likely originated from the colon, but the cancer that was in his liver was a rare aggressive cancer.
Okay.
So really, it was like we were dealing with like 2 different cancers, basically. And so they started chemo right away, and I think he had 12 cycles, if I recall. And God really blessed and preserved him through that. He went through that, and I remember the last treatment, the nurse practitioner was like, "You handled that beautifully." He had minimal side effects, but his numbers had one of the, I can't remember the levels and all of that, but I know one had went up and one had dropped, again, because we're dealing with like 2 different
Right.
cancers. So they referred us to a neuroendocrine specialist, and his recommendation was like, treat it like your classic colon cancer patient, basically, what that chemo treatment that they normally do for colon cancer. So we went back, did that, and with that treatment, it was you go in for chemo, and you have to come home with the chemo back for 48 hours.
Okay.
Or you can take pills, which my husband ended up ultimately doing that because he was like, I already don't want to do chemo. I'm not going to come home with chemo. So you would think this would be easier. So he ended up having to take 10, no, for 2 weeks, he had to take, yeah, it was 10 pills a day, basically,
That's a
5
lot.
in the morning. And it was a lot for 2 weeks. So after 2 cycles of that, he was like, I'm done, because and he was supposed to have 18 cycles of that. And his fingertips were starting to turn black just after 2 cycles. And he was like, I'm done, and I get it and I understand that. And so he had like maybe a 2-month break, maybe, and he started losing weight, and we contributed that, we thought, because we had started like a vegan diet, and we thought the weight loss was from that, but ultimately it was because the cancer was just, it was just growing. So speeding up to February, I think by this time, I think we were going to the doctor like weekly, because he was losing weight and everything. So they recommended immunotherapy. The immunotherapy didn't target the cancers that he had. It was just basically experimental, basically, to see if you can extend life, basically. So he was supposed to do that, I believe, for 4 cycles, and after the third one, we knew that it wasn't. So by this time, so he lived 13 and a half months on a diagnosis that could have took him in 2 months. And like I said, God did bless and preserve him. If you saw him, you wouldn't know what he was going through those first 10 and a half months. The last 3 months is when it kind of, started taking a toll on him. And then, he ended up passing May 29, 2019. But he never spent a day in the hospital, no hooked up, no tubes or nothing. So even in that, God really blessed him, because his cancer journey was not like a lot of other people's cancer journeys are, no surgeries, no nothing. Yes, he did pass from it, but he didn't go through a lot of what other people went through with cancer diagnosis.
Okay. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing his journey. Did you and your children endure this?
It was more, I would say my kids really honestly were shielded from it. One, my son wasn't living here at the time. He lived like down the street, basically. So my daughter was always over his house.
Okay.
So my son went to 1 chemo treatment, which was the first one, and he didn't go back after that. My daughter never went. And then going into like his last months of life, when he would have the moments of where he's throwing up or something like that, they were never here. So they really didn't see the behind the scenes of what I saw. They did notice the weight loss. They did see that. But I feel like they didn't see the up close, far as, what I'm saying, the side effects, him actively dying. They didn't see that aside from the weight loss. And then he really wasn't communicating a lot. I mean, he could, but it was just, he, soft whisper, and then when I did have to tell them, because when he went for the last appointment, they basically gave him 2 weeks. God blessed him with 4 weeks. So to tell them that was very hard, but I can tell through them 13 and a half months, God really upgirded me with strength that I didn't know I had. I had no idea I had the strength that I did. And I guess you don't know until you go through something. The level of strength, if you lean into God, that he can give you. So that was hard. I mean, that was hard, but we were believing God to heal him, because God has spoken over and over and over that he was going to be healed, which ultimately he did heal him. It just wasn't the healing that we, my husband, were expecting. And I can go ahead and share this because it's in the book. The night before he passed.
Or you cannot share because they need to read the book.
You're right. Okay. You're right. Thank you. I don't want to share the whole book. They won't go buy it.
And but I will say this. There's one thing to listen to a podcast. There's another thing to take a book, highlight it, write your life story next to it, go back to it, and be encouraged. So even though we're talking about different things, the reader for themselves will, so now they can hear your voice as they're reading the pages.
Reading the book,
and understanding the story and what goes on. I'm going to skip a few chapters.
Okay.
And hold on, I'm not I'll just say you talk about his last meal. You share about the weight loss, the diet.
Mhm.
I want to read my testimony. As I reflected over the last 13 and a half months of Oz life, I realized that God was preparing me for this journey.
Yeah. So just looking back prior to that, so the diagnosis was 2018. Because like I said, the diagnosis that he had could have took him in 2 months. Um, if God would have took him then, I probably would have handled it a lot different, because I probably wasn't as strong in the faith that I probably needed to be, or it just would have been a devastating blow. It was still devastating. But God gave us that time to build my husband's faith up and to build my faith up. And you're never prepared, especially when someone has cancer or has an illness. Um, you're never prepared for it. You may expect it, but you're never prepared for it until it, actually happens. But looking back over that, he really was building me up, preparing me. Um, we had moved, and that's kind of a little bit of a testimony in the book as well. Just looking back, God was just setting up so many different things, um, to let me know that he knew what was coming down the pipe, and it's just so many things that I look back, even now, it's just like, man, God, you knew. Because we had just moved into a townhouse. No, I'm not gonna go into
I
the
deliberately
aspect
skipped
of
over that part. Nope, I'm not.
it.
So
Okay.
I did read that part. I'm gonna put on my reading glasses,
Okay.
and I am going to read what is here on the back for public knowledge.
Okay.
A Widow I Became is a true fairy tale love story that ended too soon by the cruelty of cancer, but victorious in Jesus for God's glory. I want to share my testimony and my husband's testimony of our cancer journey and ultimately his passing for God's glory. You may ask the question, how can death be for God's glory? Upon my husband's passing is when I realized is for God's glory. As I open up to share a glimpse of my journey, my prayer is that you see the willingness of God, see the realness of God, the faithfulness of God, and the strength of God through difficult times in life, with the hope of drawing people to God. A young widow I became when he took his last breath at the age of 44 on May 29, 2019 at 8:15 a.m. On paper, I am either single or widowed, but in my heart, I am still married to the love of my life. I believe wholeheartedly that God has a plan and a purpose for my life, and He is upgirding me with strength for the journey I must walk in. And so, what is that's on your hat, and how does that relate to the strength and the journey that you are on?
Ooh, it's widow with a purpose. So when I wrote that book, that was literally, I think, like maybe within the first 6 months or something after he passed. So just to hear that, it's just like, wow. So by the time the book came out, it was like a year and a half later after his passing. But after my husband passed, maybe probably within the first 6 months, God started putting widows in my path, young widows. I was 44 at the time. But he just started placing a lot of people or reconnecting me with people that lost their husbands. And I was just like, what is going on? I mean, it was just like it was starting to just be a flood. And I just, began to talk. So I could just tell. I was like, okay, Lord, this is for your glory, because this is nothing that I ever thought I would be doing, like a widow's ministry. So as the time went on, it just birthed out Widow with a Purpose, because I think I started, maybe like hashtagging it, and then, just in the midst of that, my daughter was still in high school, so my focus was getting her graduated and everything like that. But I started seeing what God was doing, because again, He's putting widows in my path, and people was being blessed and encouraged by things I was saying, things I was posting, and I'm just like, man, Lord, so this is because He knows our beginning, He knows our ending. Um, and to see how what I've been through blesses and encourages someone else, um, whether they're currently in the widowhood shoes or at some point you may be. It just all depends.
It is a
Um,
relationship gold. I mean, let's be serious.
exactly, to death do you part. I mean, realistically, that's it.
Yes.
Um, I just never thought it would have been at 44. I was just like, this is wow,
Crazy.
looking forward to empty nesting, just like this was not my plan, Lord. This was not my plan, but he he knew what the plan was. So it has blessed and encouraged somebody else. And even through this, it has been healing for me. And that's not to say that I have some rough days, because like I said, the 5-year anniversary just hit, and so many pivotal moments have been happening where I feel like I'm going backwards. But it's just like, wow, I thought I'd be a little bit further along, but everybody is different on their journey. One thing I do know, God is nigh to the broken heart. He will heal your broken heart. And for me, I'm kind of on the cup, but in the midst of that, almost 3 years to the day, my mother passed. So
Mm,
3 years after my husband passed, my mother passed. So I'm in the cult of compound grief.
yes.
So I think that's why my struggle right now at 5 years is kind of more intensified because of the compound grief. But the faithfulness of God and me just sharing my testimony and just being there for other widows, just to encourage them, you can make it, you will make it. You just got to lean into God, because if it wasn't for my relationship with God, or having a relationship with God, I would have been a complete and total basket case when my husband passed. Like I said earlier, we was together since I was 16. I was 44 when he passed. Um, that was the love of my life, and it's just like now he's gone. So if it was not for God and seeing how He has strengthened in me, comforted me, it's just like, Lord, I just thank you. And to share my husband's testimony, because he has a powerful testimony. You'll see it in the book. He has a powerful testimony that I share often. But just even my own testimony of how God has saw me through, um, the strength He has upgirded me with these past 5 years. Um, it's been nobody but Him, and it's all for His glory. Out of all of it, Widow with a Purpose. I Keep Smiling, the
So,
blog that I
so let
do.
me ask you this: what happens
Mm.
within the umbrella of Widow with a Purpose? What does that look like? How does that show up
So,
for people?
so basically, so I have a private Facebook group, and then I've had 3 events. So I have like an event like every year. So the last 2 years I had a Widow with a Purpose tea. So that's kind of what I do to try to bring widows together, and then their support system, to come be a support, because you need a support system. Because when my husband passed, again, I was 44. I ain't know no young widows. I had one of my friends, she was like early 60s, but her husband passed actually when she was 49. But outside of her, I didn't know no widows. So that's why, like I said, I started seeing it early on. God was just putting them in my path, and it's just like, okay, this is what the plan is, so just to be there for other widows. And I've talked to a lot of widows of all ages, but a lot of them are
Okay.
young. And there's different facets to widowhood. It depends on where you're at. Some got little kids, some kids are out the home. It's just so many different facets to it and so many different layers to it. With that, but sometimes I do look back and just be like, wow, God, it's nobody but you that has carried me through and birthed this out of me. Something I never would have thought. Or to even write a book. I mean, that's something I never ever thought about. I didn't even honestly, I wasn't even a book reader. I wasn't even a book reader. I mean, I do read them now, since my husband passed, because I've read some other widow books that were encouraging for me early on in my journey, but I wasn't a book reader. So writing a book was just not a goal of mine in
Okay.
life.
When you thought about having this conversation, were there some topics that you wanted to make sure we covered or went over, or maybe something I missed in our dialogue?
No, I just wanted to, when I was thinking about it, I just wanted to just be able to say something to encourage someone that may be new on this journey or old in this journey. Because some people may go along 2, 3 years and thinking they're okay, and then really they're not.
Mm,
Um, or just life things happen that can kind of like just draw you back. Just to say that God is not. If you really, really lean into him, he will see you through. Um, that scripture where it says that he will turn your mourning into joy. I've literally seen that scripture come alive in me. I do have joy. Now, it may not be every day, but he has turned my mourning into joy. Like I can look at a picture of my husband and I can smile. But depending on what's going on, some days I may just cry. I've had a lot of them moments lately. But, the sting will be a little less as time go on. And just to not compare your widow journey to someone else's widow journey, because everybody is different. Everybody marriage was different. Because sometimes I think that plays a factor in some people's grief mechanism after their husband passed. um but everybody's journey is different. But just to encourage widows of all ages, not necessarily young ones, but that God will see you through. You will make it. Um, a lot of things that you go through early on, different, whether it's anger, whatever, a lot of that is normal. But don't stay stuck in that. Don't stay stuck in it. But God will see you through. But lean into him. That's what helped me. And that's why I can sit here 5 years later, um, to be able to tell you that or to be able to share that.
thank you. You mentioned two things. What would you say to the person, I'm mad at God that he took my husband?
I would say that's normal. It is a normal mechanism. And if you read the book of I actually just went through Grief Share. I don't know if you went through that or familiar with Grief Share. Um, but I think it's Psalms or Proverbs, is the book of lamenting, basically where you're crying out in anger towards God. That's a normal, but you can't stay stuck and mad forever. You know what I'm saying? Ask him, God, help me with this. I don't understand. You would never probably really understand, because I've had moments of like, God, I don't understand. But at the same time, I'm just like, it was my husband's time. It was his time. And don't stay stuck in it. Find you a local church. If you don't have a church, get into your word and let God walk alongside of you to where he can heal your broken heart. It will
Thank
probably
you.
never ever be fully healed, but he will mend it. He will mend it.
Thank you. You say don't get stuck. How do I not get stuck? What is it? What are some actions to prevent myself from staying stuck?
I would say get involved. Like I said, I just went through Grief Share. I was a assistant facilitator on Grief Share. If you need to talk to a therapist, do that. Um, Talk to other widows. That can be helpful. Find you something to do. I just started probably just within the last year. I've been coloring. I didn't realize coloring was therapeutic. I didn't realize that. Finding something that will help you. I don't know if you have children, grandchildren, when I'm something to get involved in something. Don't just isolate because it's easy to do that. Isolate. You don't want to be bothered. You don't want to go out. Find something that or pick up a new hobby, something you may used to do and stopped or something like that, but try to get something that will bring you a little bit of joy
Mhm.
to where you can kind of start moving out of it. But again, ultimately, prayer, reading your word, and just asking God to help you, and He will. He will. I mean, I'm a living testament of that He will help you.
Thank you. I want to give you opportunity if you have any questions of me.
Because I think I just started following you maybe within the last year.
Okay.
And you had one of my sister friends on as well, Tawana, because she's from Gary.
Yeah.
So we actually just connected within the last year as well. Um, but no, I love what you're doing. I know that you gotten remarried. So I don't what was like the time span or difference from when you lost your husband to when you got remarried?
Okay. And I want to go into Tawana and give her big shout outs. Tawana,
Yes.
Tawana is one of the founding members of Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Yes.
She is the facilitator of our private Facebook group, and
Wow. Okay.
she's responsible for a lot of stuff that's happening on the back end with the
Wow.
Facebook group.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Okay.
She's
Okay.
she low key high. She low key but high speed. Um,
Okay. Okay. See,
don't
I didn't know
underestimate
all of
Tawana.
that.
She'll talk slow, and you kind of think like, but oh
Yes.
no, she making them gains.
Yes.
She
Yes.
is supporting me on TikTok with different conversations that we have
Wow.
there. Every
Okay.
Tuesday night, I do a TikTok live conversation,
Really?
and
Okay.
Tawana is
Okay.
there interacting with people. She talks to
Mhm.
a lot of widows while she's caring for her mom, but she is very
Yes.
much
Yes.
into encouraging and supporting. So I'm
Wow,
glad that
that's
we have.
awesome. I didn't know that because we haven't actually talked on the phone just because life has been happening here lately. But we did
Right.
used to kind of check in every few weeks or whatever. But I didn't know she was behind the scenes doing all that. So
Oh
I'm
yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. I am glad to hear that.
I would
So
not be
yes.
able to do a lot of things I'm doing if it wasn't for her support in doing that. Like
Wow,
she
that's
texted me, she's like,
awesome.
"Are we doing such and such?" I was like, "Girl, yes, I'm sorry."
Yeah.
So she pulling my chain and making sure.
Okay.
No, she is awesome.
That's
Um,
awesome. That's awesome. Yes.
my husband Mark and I were together for 32 years. We were married for
Mhm.
29. He
Okay.
passed in March 11th, 2017, and I remarried February 22nd, 2021. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So that was a nice little space. What about 4
About
years? It
five
sounds like
five years. Hold on.
5 years.
Hold on. This is 24. No, I got married February 22nd, 2022. My bad.
Okay, okay. So just 2 years ago. Yeah. So
5 years.
you
Yeah.
about 5 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I know, and when you read the back of my book and it said that I would always be his wife, I think that's what it says. So I know some widows struggle with the word widow. Um, for me, and I believe because one, God was intentional with the word widow in the book, in the Bible, because widow has I do in it. That shows that you were married. So for me, I don't mind carrying the title of a widow, because that shows I was married. I was a wife for 21 years. Um, I don't want to be classified as single. Technically, I mean, I guess I am, but I was married, So um I will and I think I'm gonna ask you this question to see. So you're remarried. Do you still say or see yourself as your late husband's widow?
Yes,
You will
ma'am.
always be
Oh,
okay.
girl,
That's
hold on.
yes,
I
yes,
was with that man for 32 years.
yes,
I
yes,
was
yes,
with that man when he went into cardiac arrest and we were in that
yes,
hotel room alone.
yes.
That man and I traveled the world together. That man
Wow.
and I have 2 children. And to
Yes.
tell you the wonderful man that I am with now,
Mhm. Mhm.
2 things. We have been dating, I want to say 5 or 6-ish months. And he was at my
Mhm.
place and I was getting him something to drink, some water or lemonade. And as I was
Mhm.
walking towards him, I just
Mhm.
started crying. And
Wow.
he's on the couch and he's like, "You okay? What's going on?" And I said,
Mhm.
"You seem," I said, so he's smart. He took the glasses out of my hand and put them on the counter.
Okay.
And he said, "What's going on?" I said, "You seem like a nice enough guy." I
Mhm.
said, "But I realized for whatever reason at that moment, that was
Mhm.
the day that I was 1 year of living in Virginia.
Okay.
And my late
Okay.
husband and I planned to move to Virginia. In fact, Mark was already living in Virginia. We met in Delaware when he went into cardiac arrest. And I was
Okay.
like, this is not the version of life that I thought
Mhm.
I was going to have when I
Yes.
thought of living in Virginia for 1 year.
Mhm. Mhm.
And he said, you never have to feel bad about missing your husband.
Yeah.
Tell
Yeah.
me what I can do to support you. Do you want me to
Mhm.
stay? Do you want me to leave? Can I touch
Mhm.
you? Do you want me to hug you? What do you
Mhm.
want? And I'll do
Mhm.
that. And I was like,
Yeah.
this right here,
Yes.
this has potential. This,
Right.
this,
Yes.
this right here, I'm like, okay, we're gonna see where this goes.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
fast forward, we dated for 3 years.
Okay.
Um, Months before, just maybe weeks or a month before the wedding, I was at work, and somebody was like,
Mhm.
"Well, when are you gonna change your last name?" I was like, "Hootie, what?"
Right.
And I was
Yeah.
like, "I ain't never thought of such a thing." And they said, "Well, what does Fred think?" And I was like, "That's like asking me about cutting my hair. This something this wrong my hair. I never asked you this. This my body." And,
Right.
but I said, "You know what? I need to ask him because this could be a
Just
deal breaker." We never
right.
had this conversation.
Mhm.
So we were out to eat, and I said, "What do you think about names?" He said, "Last name?" I said, "Yeah."
Mhm.
He said, "You change your last name?" He said, "Your children would not have a
Mhm.
parent in this world with the same last name."
Wow.
Girl, and
That's
I was
yeah.
like, my dude right here.
Yeah, that's yes.
That I was like, in case there was any doubt,
Right.
he
That
was
was some
like,
confirmation for
he
you.
said, "I don't care about that. You love
Yeah.
me, you're gonna marry me and be my wife. So people can
Right.
call me by his last name unofficially." But the
Right.
fact that now the second thing he said, "Well, you kind of old to be changing your name." I said, "Didn't nobody ask you all that? Didn't nobody ask you?
Right.
Shut your mouth."
Exactly. Yeah, that'd just
You-
be too much of a hassle.
I was like, he went wrong though. But
Yeah.
and even when I started this nonprofit, he was
Mhm.
contacting his friends. She needs follow on her YouTube. She's trying to get to this.
Wow,
His
that's awesome.
his confidence in who he is and what he represents to me
Yes.
surpasses anything
Yeah.
else. So
Yes.
I am always Mark's widow. Nobody,
Right. That's
unless you can take away 32 years of me being his
right.
wife, You
You
can go
can't.
kick rocks as far as I'm concerned
Exactly.
all day long.
Exactly. Exactly. I love to hear that, um, because that's probably a popular question. I'm sure you probably get, like how soon or whatever. But just to hear that, because I remember saying that one time about something, and I was like, well, I'm gonna always be his widow. And somebody was just kind of like, but I am that. I mean, we were married when he passed. I will always be, even if I got remarried, I'm still gonna be known for Va's widow, you
And the
know?
person is telling you that, I'm gonna be like, have you did your husband?
Right.
I'm gonna need
Exactly.
you. I'm gonna need you. I'm gonna need you to do less. I'm gonna need you to do less because
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I love to hear that. And then obviously, if someone does get remarried, exactly how he responded, that's because it shouldn't be nobody that, get offended or jealous because you're talking about because I said if I was to ever get remarried, I'm still gonna do Widow with a Purpose because this is a ministry that God
yes.
birthed me with, and I've been a widow for however long, if I do get remarried. But it's just like this is my ministry, and at the end of the day, I'm always gonna be Va's widow, whether I get remarried or not. So just to hear you, being remarried and still look at it like that, that gives me confirmation that I was on the right track when I made that statement.
For me, you will always be Bond's widow. I will always be
Mhm.
Mark's widow. I will.
Right.
It's just like saying I I get to laugh. I get to live. What I think is a disservice is in the world there's an anticipation for a man to get remarried. But there's
Yes.
the idea that we're supposed to be, I don't know,
Mhm.
in shackles and be on lock
Exactly.
forever.
Exactly.
I fulfilled my purpose. I can quote some
Exactly.
verses with a so you can't come
Mhm.
for me. If you want,
Exactly.
if your version of being a
Mhm.
widow is to
Mhm.
forever stay single,
Right.
go ahead. That's your choice.
Everybody is different. Exactly.
But
Exactly.
and if your version of being widow is to lament and
Mhm.
choose not to want to find joy in life, I wouldn't
Mhm.
want that for you, but I
Right.
accept that if that is
Exactly.
your decision.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
you can never come to me and take
Mhm.
away what I have experienced because
Exactly.
what the journey that I'm walking doesn't look like how you describe it.
Exactly. And everybody's journey is different. And I know early on, when my husband first passed, I was like, that's the last thing I'm thinking about. I ain't
Girl,
never
that wasn't
getting
on my
married.
ticket.
I'm
That
good.
was not like I was sitting there going, "Oh,
Right.
I'm gonna get
Yeah,
remarried."
I'm get
Because I was like, how am I gonna go at the big old age of 51 and have been with the same man for 32 years and
right.
talk about somebody
Exactly.
even gonna hold my hand,
Is is
let alone
is
kiss me and make love to me? Oh, baby, no. But
exactly.
my heart flutters for him
Mhm.
in a way I
Yeah.
never conceived
Thought.
possible. I remember
Mhm.
asking God, like, okay, I felt realized I had more love to give. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, you're gonna have to make this real easy because
Mhm.
I mean, I got interview questions. We on the first date and sir,
Right.
and sir,
Exactly.
oh, hold on.
Exactly.
He would wake up every morning with at least 6 to 7 questions. And
Wow.
I wanted to answer. And he was like, I just got a cup of coffee. Give me a second. I'm gonna answer
Give
all
me
the questions.
just give me some time. Give me some time. So that's wonderful. I love to hear that. That's awesome. And I think everybody, because like I said earlier on, I was like, I'm good. But I'm in a space now. I'm open to what God has for me. So in the beginning, I'm like, never, I'm good. But I'm open to that because I'm a little further on, because I'm
Right.
just like, my husband wanted, I mean, he said that he wants me to be happy. My mother said the same thing, even though me having a man or getting remarried doesn't
It
have to
doesn't
just
equate happiness.
exactly,
It doesn't solve the grief
exactly,
situation.
exactly,
One, I would
exactly.
highly recommend. Um,
Hmm.
I have different people that I coach and they go, do you think I should be dating or not like that? And I'll ask them a few
Hmm.
questions and they go, yeah, no,
Hmm.
I'm not ready for that. I'm like, okay,
Right,
because
exactly,
you're not
exactly.
dating, like, are you in a mental place that you would want to
Hmm.
date somebody in your position? first
Right.
of all.
Exactly.
And if you're
Exactly.
thinking, "Oh, no," okay, then stop. If you're
Exactly.
thinking, "I'm going to date because I'm gonna find a replacement for my husband," I
Right.
wouldn't recommend dating. Can you sit
Exactly.
down and see somebody for who they are versus comparing going, "My husband was like
Mhm.
this, they're not like that, and da 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 da
Exactly.
da." And I'll
Exactly.
say this, I have on my YouTube channel, every
Mhm.
Friday, I put out
Mhm.
a under the title Dating a Widow. I'm not
Mhm.
gatekeeping. I am sharing helpful tips and
Yes.
information as far as your
Mhm.
mental well-being, some spaces you need to
Mhm.
be in, some tips on dating that
Exactly.
I know that are very helpful. So if you
Mhm.
haven't followed the YouTube channel, you may want to follow that.
Yeah,
And
I do. I do.
every oh, okay. So you have so
Yeah,
have
I
you
do. Yeah, I've seen it.
okay. So what do you think about it? Okay, so the
I think it's good. Now I haven't been consistent, but I have watched the ones like
about
about because
dating.
I'm not dating or anything
No,
like
no,
that.
no.
But
But
like I
just
said,
from perspective,
but exactly, but I think it's very helpful and very beneficial because again, a lot of we go through that. Should I, shouldn't I,
mhm,
or whatever, when, all those different questions. So I think it is very good, that
good,
you're sharing your experience because you were a widow, now you're remarried, and just sharing how that looked for you
right,
at that time, I think is awesome, and it's very encouraging for someone else, you know what I'm saying? And I think it would encourage because at some point, I think we all, and when I say we, I'm saying widows, you're gonna have that thought like, okay,
right.
like, yeah, early on, yeah, I never would have thought, just like what you said.
Yeah, because
But
you're a deer in the headlight, and just like I woke up every day for a year
with it,
going, "He died?"
he really is
Like
gone.
like, it is
Mhm.
marked. Like, I couldn't for it took me a whole year just to say, "Tina," 'cause Tina Mark came out of my mouth
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
"I'm going to do something."
Yes.
"Hi, Tina," and I was just like,
Yes.
"What alternate multiverse am I living in?"
Yes.
So
Yes.
that first year and a half was just me trying to go,
Trying to figure it out.
"We
Like,
did
wow.
that." Like,
Mhm.
so yeah, that was I did not run out the gate talking about, "Let's start dating."
Exactly.
No,
No, because you're not ready,
I was
you're not
not.
ready. Yeah, yeah, you're not ready. And one other question is, so how were your kids at the time that your husband passed?
My daughter my husband was a good dad. He
Mm,
was a good dad.
yeah,
My son was in the military,
okay.
and so the night Mark died, I was on the phone with my son when the
Mhm.
doctor finally came in and gave me that information.
Okay.
He stayed strong on that phone, and he told me he fell apart.
Yeah.
Not until he folded his dad's flag in his dad's service, because my son was in the military at the time.
Mhm.
He carried
Mhm.
his dad's casket, and I made a video about that on my Instagram,
Okay.
showing on Father's Day last year. I think I
Okay.
played that, but it was maybe 5 years later.
Mhm.
I was in this house now because I
Mhm.
had COVID, and it was Christmas, and it was just about over. And
Mhm.
Alexander was in my bedroom. He was on the far side of the room, and we were watching the claymation cartoon things we used to watch. Uh,
Mhm.
Rain, Mr. Heat Miser, Mr. Freeze Miser, and we're talking
Mhm.
about all the stuff growing up. And he was walking out of the room, and then
Mhm.
he ran back to me and flew himself on me, and he
Wow.
wailed and cried out of his
Yeah.
gut like I had not heard in the entire time.
Mhm. And that was what, 5 years later you
5
said?
years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he finally just just let it out.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
daughter was there the night her dad died,
Okay. Mhm.
because well, when they told me they didn't know if he would make it through the night,
Mhm.
I called a friend of the family, and they brought her there.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I was in that hospital room losing my whole mind. I had
Yeah.
crawled up on that table and they told me your daughter's here. And I got myself together so that she
Mhm.
didn't come into this room with her dad deceased and see
Right.
her mother inconsolable
Mhm.
and devastating, and
Yeah.
rightfully so.
Exactly.
Rightfully
Exactly.
so. And my
Yeah.
daughter has seen her mom go from this high functioning person to, like, I know how to stare at paint and like not thinking nothing. Like was
Mhm.
like I thought it was a gift only guys knew. Like I can go, what are you thinking about?
Uh-huh.
And she went from seeing somebody taking care of business, and I remember that
To
night I was taking a shower. She said, "Mom, what do we do now?" And I looked at her and I said, I don't know. And she never now she's 22, 23. She never heard me talk about
no,
I don't know about something.
no, exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
she's seen me trust God. She's seen me reach into the things that she's heard me maybe talk about. She
Right.
saw the community of women that are my girlfriends, that she
Mhm.
saw them rally and stand
Around
strong. She
you. Yeah.
saw the strength of my family to stand by my side. And
Mhm.
so I dealt with breast cancer, had an emergency hysterectomy October of 2016, and then Mark died March of 2017.
Wow. Wow.
So anything we had walked out or talked out, it
Mhm.
was upfront and visual.
Right. Yes. Wow. Wow. So they were what, early 20s,
Yep.
teen and
My son
teens
was 19 because he had
okay.
just went to the military. My daughter was 21. My daughter is on the board of directors for Widowhood Real Talk with Tina. She is one of the board members.
Wow. Okay.
She
Okay.
is she's responsible for content creation and
Oh,
directing things. I have to send to her, be like, okay, is this okay? And she goes,
mhm.
back and forth. So she has
Yeah.
a vital role in keeping her dad's memory alive with doing
That's
that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So how did they take it when you got remarried? Were they
So my son lives here in Virginia and he
mhm,
lived here with me. He's met Fred organically.
okay.
Um, and my current husband's middle name is Mark.
Okay.
Girl, when we were on a date and he told me that, I said, "Say that
What?
again, sir." Because I almost left the whole restaurant. I was like, "It's a wrap. I'm done here.
Right.
We ain't nobody trying to." I was like,
Yes, yeah.
my son walked me down the aisle. We did a
Yeah.
dance. He likes Fred. He likes Fred's sons. Um,
Okay, good, good,
my
good.
daughter,
It's
the
kinda
reality of me getting married is another thing. It's like her dad is really no longer here.
yeah,
And I can
yeah.
respect that. I can
Right,
respect
exactly.
her.
It's
She is glad that I'm happy. She is glad
mhm,
that I have somebody that takes care of me well. And I'll
yes.
say this, and I think you're in the same position. I did
Mhm.
not have to get married because I needed somebody to take care of me.
Right,
I
right.
did not
Mhm,
get married because I needed someone's provisions.
mhm,
And I'm
mhm.
grateful that that was not the
Yes,
situation. I
yes.
was able to choose to get married
Mm,
because I felt like I still had love in my heart to give and to
yeah.
share, and that
Mhm,
manifests in that. So my children take solace that their
mhm,
dad had a plan in his
mhm.
absence, that I was fine.
Right,
And
yeah.
so
Yeah,
all of
that's
those things, they just look and go like, you and dad, like, and when you're doing stuff, you're just kind of doing it along the way. And then you look back and it's like, we really had a good plan.
yeah.
We
Had it in
okay,
place.
yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing
You're
that.
welcome.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
welcome.
yeah,
So I
so
will allow you to have the closing comments for this conversation.
okay. Well, first of all, I just wanna thank you for having me on the Widowhood Real Talk with Tina. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I've said something that will encourage someone that watches this broadcast. Just hold on. Just hold on. God will see you through. And I just appreciate the opportunity to share my story, to share my testimony. And like I said, it's all for God's glory. What we go through, a lot of times our purpose is birthed out of pain, and it's always to help and encourage someone else. So it may not necessarily be for you, it's for someone else, because people are watching, people are looking. People that I've ran across and ultimately ended up losing their husband, you know, when their husband did pass, it's just like, wow, Shevetta, you've been encouraging me. And they probably been seeing me prior to their husband passing, and now they're in that predicament. So
Mm,
it's like, Lord, I just thank you. I just want to be a representation of him and show how he will see you through um, the magnitude of a loss of a spouse. Yes.
thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.